Pervez Siddiqui co-founded a nonprofit that helped immigrants. He sat on a Brooklyn community board. He was photographed sitting with the incoming mayor of New York City. And the whole time, federal prosecutors say he was running a $38 million Medicaid scam out of 2 adult daycares in Coney Island. Patients got cash kickbacks for doing nothing. Some weren't even in the country. 8 people just got arraigned. And this one has everything. Fake services, political connections, and a 78-year-old who thought no one was watching. So Pervez is 78 years old and based in Brooklyn. He owns around 15 pharmacies across New Jersey. He co-founded a nonprofit called APNA Community Services, which provides support for immigrant communities and elderly residents in Brooklyn. He also sat on one of the borough's community boards. On paper, Pervez looked like the kind of guy you'd invite to a fundraiser. Community leader, small business owner, the kind of person who shows up in local newspaper photos shaking hands with politicians. And the politician thing isn't an exaggeration. There's a photo of Pervez sitting with Zohran Mamdani. If that name doesn't ring a bell, Mamdani was elected mayor of New York City in November 2025. He made history as the first South Asian and first Muslim to hold that office. And according to reports, Pervez was a donor to local Democratic campaigns and had ties to the American-Pakistani Public Affairs Committee. So this wasn't some random guy running a storefront operation in the shadows. Pervez had a public profile. He had institutional credibility. People in the community trusted him. Politicians trusted him. That was the cover. According to federal prosecutors, Pervez and 7 co-conspirators were running 2 adult daycares in Brooklyn. The first was called APNA Adult Daycare. The second was called Ashiana Social Adult Daycare. Both operated in the Coney Island and Brooklyn area. And APNA Adult Daycare shared a facility with APNA Community Services, the nonprofit Pervez co-founded. Same building, same name. One side helping immigrants navigate social services and community resources. The other side, according to prosecutors, billing Medicaid for millions of dollars in services that never happened. Now, to understand why this worked for so long, you need to understand how adult daycare billing actually functions. These programs are supposed to serve adults with disabilities or other conditions that make it hard for them to live independently. Medicaid covers the cost. We're talking physical therapy, occupational therapy, social activities, nursing supervision, real services provided by real staff for people who genuinely need daily support. And the billing rates are not small. Depending on the program and the level of care, an adult daycare can bill Medicaid hundreds of dollars per patient per day. When you multiply that by dozens of enrolled patients across months and years of continuous billing, the numbers stack up fast. And that's exactly what prosecutors say happened. From 2019 all the way through December 2025, the group allegedly submitted $38 million in Medicaid claims for services that were never provided. No therapy sessions and no nursing care, no supervised social activities or staff interactions of any kind. Just billing codes submitted to Medicaid, over and over and over, for patients who weren't receiving anything. But the billing was only half of it. Prosecutors allege that Pervez and his co-conspirators were actively paying patients cash kickbacks to hand over their Medicaid cards. The arrangement was simple. You sign up for the program, you give us your Medicaid number, and we give you money. You don't have to show up. You don't have to sit in a room. You don't have to talk to a single nurse or therapist. Just hand over the card and collect your cut. The daycares handle the rest by billing the government for services you never received. Now, paying someone to lend you their government healthcare card is already a federal crime. It violates the anti-kickback statute, which makes it illegal to offer or receive payment in exchange for referrals involving federal healthcare programs. But what makes this case stand out from regular kickback schemes is what happened with some of the patients after they signed up. Some of them left the country. According to reports, participants in the program physically left the United States while the billing continued. They weren't in Brooklyn anymore. They weren't in New York. They weren't even on the continent. And their families reportedly kept collecting kickback payments on their behalf, even after the patients had gone overseas. So the daycares were billing Medicaid for providing daily in-person care to people who were sitting in another country. Therapy sessions for patients on a different continent. Nursing supervision for people who hadn't set foot in the facility in months. I guess if you're going to commit fraud, you might as well go all the way. And think about where that money comes from. Medicaid is funded by federal and state tax dollars. It exists to provide health care for people who can't afford it on their own. Elderly people, disabled people, low-income families. Every fake claim that went through Pervez's operation was money that could have gone to someone who actually needed physical therapy after a stroke. or nursing care for a parent with dementia, or occupational therapy for a person trying to regain independence after an injury. That's $38 million pulled out of a system built for vulnerable people. If you're finding this useful, subscribe. I cover stories like this every week. And Pervez wasn't some low-level guy running a sloppy side operation out of a rented storefront. He had the nonprofit. He had the community board seat. He had 15 pharmacies in New Jersey. He had the political connections. According to prosecutors, he used his reputation and his position at APP Community Services to provide legitimacy for the alleged fraud happening at APNA Adult Daycare. Same building, same name, different purposes. One door for the immigrant families who needed genuine support. Another door for the Medicaid billing machine, allegedly churning out fake claims while the nonprofit's name gave everything a clean look from the outside. Now, this kind of scheme doesn't happen in a vacuum, and Brooklyn has become ground zero for adult daycare Medicaid fraud. According to the Department of Justice, a separate case involving 2 other Brooklyn adult daycares resulted in a $68 million fraud conviction. A woman named Zakia Khan pleaded guilty to running that scheme out of Coney Island, paying kickbacks and submitting false claims across multiple years. And in Queens, according to a separate DOJ announcement, 2 men were charged in early 2026 with running a $120 million adult daycare and pharmacy fraud on both Medicare and Medicaid. That's $120 million from adult daycares and pharmacies in one case. So this isn't an isolated incident. The adult daycare billing system in New York City has become a magnet for organized fraud. The reimbursement rates are high, the oversight is spread thin, and the patient populations are often elderly or disabled, which makes verification harder. If you can recruit enough patients and submit enough fake claims, you can pull in millions before anyone notices the pattern. So, law enforcement eventually caught up with Pervez. Federal prosecutors brought charges against him and all 7 co-conspirators. All 8 defendants were arraigned in June 2026. The charges include conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud and paying illegal kickbacks in connection with federal healthcare programs. Those are serious federal charges. Healthcare fraud conspiracy alone can carry years in federal prison, and kickback violations under the anti-kickback statute stack additional time on top of whatever sentence a judge hands down. When you combine those charges across 8 defendants, all connected to the same operation, you're looking at the kind of case that federal prosecutors build over months or years before they move. And the timeline of the alleged fraud is worth paying attention to. This operation ran for 6 years, 2019 through December 2025. 6 years of billing Medicaid for fake services. 6 years of handing patients cash to borrow their government health care cards. 6 years of submitting claims for people who weren't showing up, weren't participating, and in some cases weren't even in the country. That's not a mistake or a billing error. According to prosecutors, that is a sustained, deliberate operation that moved tens of millions of taxpayer dollars through a system designed to help people who can't care for themselves. Now, to be clear, there's no indication that Mayor Zohran Mamdani knew about or had any involvement in the alleged fraud. Pervez was photographed with him. Reports indicate Pervez donated to Democratic campaigns, but there's nothing linking Mamdani to the daycare scheme itself. The photo, though, tells you something about how Pervez operated. He built relationships. He showed up at events. He positioned himself as a community leader. He sat at tables with elected officials and smiled for cameras. And the whole time, if prosecutors are right, he was running a $38 million fraud operation out of a building with his nonprofit's name on the door. The case is still in its early stages. All 8 defendants have been arraigned, and the legal process is just beginning. Nobody has been convicted yet. Pervez and his co-conspirators will have their day in court, and the presumption of innocence applies until a jury says otherwise. But the charges paint a pretty specific picture. $38 million in fake Medicaid billing, patients bribed with cash, participants who left the country while claims kept rolling in, and a community leader who prosecutors say used his nonprofit as the front door for a healthcare fraud operation. If you ask me, the nonprofit part is what makes this one sting the most. APNA Community Services does real work for immigrant communities in Brooklyn. It provides genuine support for people navigating a new country, learning systems, finding resources. And according to prosecutors, that mission, that reputation, that goodwill was used as camouflage for a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. Same building, same name, one serving the community, the other allegedly robbing Medicaid blind. Pervez is 78 years old. He built pharmacies. He sat on a community board. He co-founded a nonprofit that people in his community relied on. And now he's facing federal charges that could put him in prison for the rest of his life. You build something real, you use it as a shield, and eventually the shield breaks. More stories like this on the channel.